Okay, welcome. We are in the Senate Committee on Institutions. It is Friday, February 14th. And we are first going to listen to folks from the Vermont Housing and Conservation Coalition, and then we're going to have a quick discussion on H41, which is the VAA. We'll just introduce ourselves so that everybody knows us.
Senator Russ Engel, 6th District. Thank you. Good to see everyone.
Senator Joe Major, Windsor District.
And I'm Rob Plunkett, Bennington District Senator.
Senator Sam Douglas, Orleans County District.
And Wendy Harrison, I'm the chair of this committee and I represent Wyndham District. It's a lot of constituents in there. Wonderful. So I understand Kathy, you would like to set us off.
Good afternoon and happy Valentine's Day. I'm Kathy Beyer. I'm a co-chair of the Vermont Housing and Conservation Coalition, and I also work for Evernorth. But mostly I want to say we have such great appreciation that we're able to have this legislative day. And it really is wonderful to see this coalition, which has been together for 35 years, bringing together housing and conservation. So thank you. We've got some great speakers. We're going to start off with some folks online from the Vermont Land Trust and the Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Terrific. Thanks. So they will start, so we'll have a different. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
It should be Jennifer Garrett and
yeah.
Jennifer, what's her last name?
Latham?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Jennifer Garrett, if you are ready. There you are.
Hi there.
Hi. Thank you.
Can everyone,
For yourself and let us know what you want us to know.
great, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Are you able to see a beautiful picture of a view of a
Yes.
landscape? Excellent. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Jennifer Garrett, and I'm a project director at Vermont Land Trust in Wyndham County. My role, main part of my role is to work with private landowners, nonprofits, and governmental entities to conserve private and public forest land in southeastern Vermont. And I'm here today with Jennifer Latham, who is the board chair of the Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association, which is a volunteer-led nonprofit conservation organization based in Wyndham County. And we'd like to use a very special southern Vermont ridgeline as an example of the profound impact that Vermont Housing and Conservation Board funding has in Vermont communities. First, I'd just like to share a little bit about Vermont Land Trust. We're a statewide 501c3 nonprofit conservation organization with 47 employees who work all around the state, and we have over 3,000 members. Our mission is to help people protect, care for, and connect to the Vermont home that we share. And over the last 48 or so years, we've protected hundreds of thousands of acres of forests and farmlands and water resources and other important lands across the state, over 11% of the land. And the main way that we do that is through conservation easements. We hold over 2,000 conservation easements. And we also own some land. And we have a very important relationship with Vermont Housing and Conservation Board because the conservation funding that they grant is an important source of funding for us to accomplish this conservation on farmland and community forests around the state, like the one we'll be talking about today. So Jennifer Latham and I would like to share a story of the Windmill Ridge. And this story involves the amazing power of volunteers and the critical role of VHCB funding in protecting land, conserving land and water, connecting forested landscapes, and protecting important places for people and wildlife in southeastern Vermont. The Windmill Ridge is a prominent landform in Windham County. If you're familiar with the area, it stretches across about 15 miles north to south from about Rockingham south to Dummerston and Newfane. And if you've ever heard of Putney Mountain or the Pinnacle, these are points along that ridge line. The map shows the several protected forest land parcels that are publicly accessible, owned by both the state and a number of nonprofit organizations. So on this map, there's about 6,500 acres of publicly accessible forest land. And of that, 5,000 acres has been acquired and conserved by 4 volunteer-run nonprofit conservation organizations: the Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association, Putney Mountain Association, Green Mountain Conservancy, and Bull Creek Common Lands. And of the land of this category, 4,500 acres has been protected with the help of VHCB conservation funding. That's about $3.4 million over nearly 3 decades. So what's so important about this? The ridge is part of a critically important forest corridor, an area that's been identified by ecologists and landscape models as among the highest priority for protection in Vermont. And the green shading on the map shows these important forest blocks. Connected protected forest land is vital for Vermont wildlife. It allows them to have diverse habitats and room to move around. It's also vital for water quality protection, and it allows us to retain climate resilience in the years ahead, and to also retain our strong economies of forestry and tourism. Oh, I also wanted to point out that this map shows the respective parcel ownerships of these 4 volunteer-led organizations. And Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association is shown in orange. They're the largest of the landholders. So the ridge not only has a lot of important forest land, but it also has a lot of important biodiversity features, such as rare plants and uncommon forest types and wetlands. And it is an amazing recreational destination. The ridge and the nearby areas, the entire ridge and adjacent areas, are host to a 28-mile trail system that can be accessed on multiple points along the way in the different towns. So you can lace up your trail shoes in Grafton and hike all the way to Dummerston. So you can see that this protected landscape is really important to the community, and you'll hear a little bit more about that from Jennifer Latham. So how did all of this come about? The 4 nonprofit conservation organizations are made up of Southern Vermont citizens. They're community members, they're volunteers, unpaid, and they're people who spend their personal time forming boards, in committees and applying for grants and permits and building community relationships to protect this land. And importantly, they also steward the land, creating trails and essentially ensuring the land's natural resources are protected. Vermont Land Trust holds the conservation easements on these lands, most of them anyway, and we provide project support during the conservation process and stewardship support after conservation. Each of these organizations has its own story and its own identity, but none of them would have accomplished what they have today without Vermont Housing and Conservation Board funding. And they won't be able to continue their work unless they remain funded. So today we'll focus on the Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association. It began in 1992 when a group of citizens were inspired by the loss of a loved one to create a trail to the pinnacle, which is the highest point on the ridge. It took a few years for them to find that path, but by 1997, they figured out a way to protect 415 acres, and they joined forces with Vermont Land Trust, and they received their first conservation grant from VHCB for $50,000. And this photo shows the celebration back in 1997, the celebration of that accomplishment. Since that time, 13 more VHCB grants have helped fund the acquisition and conservation of nearly 2,500 acres, just a few parcels at a time over the last, 28 years. And in fact, they just added another 96 acres on the ridge 2 months ago. So the total over this time to protect this land, well, at least the total of VHCB grant money is about $1.6 million for acquisition funds. This doesn't include the feasibility funding and the capacity grants that they received that made it possible for them to bring these projects to the application process. So the protected forest land and everything that it contains will be a lasting benefit for the community, for water quality and wildlife and the local economy in this area. We're so proud of our conservation relationship with Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association, and we're so inspired by all the volunteers that have put their personal time into this. But VHCB funding plays a critical role in all of they've accomplished and their ability to continue doing this great work. And this is just one landscape in one corner of the state. VHCB conservation funding has important impacts throughout the state. So with that in mind, Vermont Land Trust is requesting that you support VHCB funding at its full statutory share, 36.9 million, so we can keep doing this great work all over the state. I'd now like to invite Jennifer Latham to share her thoughts about VHCB funding and her organization.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to participate today. My name is Jennifer Latham, and I'm the board chair of the Pinnacle, and I live in Westminster West, which is in Windham County, right at the foothills of the Pinnacle. I'm really excited to talk about the importance that VHCB has had with our organization. And I think it's actually not important. It's essential, the role that they have played. We would not be 2,800 acres strong without VHCB and Vermont Land Trust. So I have to apologize a little bit. Jen's trying to been coaching me, but I get a little waterworks. I cry because it's very meaningful. Looking back at what everybody's accomplished. But I'll try to work through it. Nothing to see here. I want to start with how VHCB funding has grown in support over the years. I think initially they were supporting the purchase of the property. So, whatever the real estate listing was, the acquisition of the land itself. But that's actually just the beginning of a lot of costs to complete a conservation project. We have appraisals, surveys, environmental assessments, legal costs, transfer taxes, local property taxes, which we do pay, and of course the conservation easements. And as time has gone on, VHCB has been able to support more of these project costs, and that's really been instrumental in allowing us to increase the pace of conservation that we're able to do because we spend more time conserving and being more ambitious about what we can accomplish. I think it's important to say that in addition to the critical funding from VHCB, the Pinnacle, we estimate that we've raised almost or over $2 million to acquire and conserve these 2,800 acres. Most of it here in Windham County from the 6 communities in which we hold land. Anyone who's done fundraising in, rural Vermont knows that this was done like $25 at a time. People give what they can afford. when you have a family that's feeding, clothing, and sheltering, their family, I think that giving money to conserve land is an act of devotion. I share this with you so that you can see that VHCB is following this community's lead. They are following the community support for these projects. And as Jen told you, you saw the photos. We have shelters and we have a lot of trails. And the VHCB funding ensures that this is not a nature sanctuary where nobody can go. It ensures public access in perpetuity. And we get a lot of visitors. And I just want to share with you how we know this. We have some hard data and we have a lot of anecdotal evidence. The most common evidence that we see is full parking lots. One of our directors went up on New Year's Day to one of our busiest trailheads. We plow it, keep it open all year round. And there were 17 cars on New Year's Day morning. It was just around freezing. And only 2 of those cars were from Vermont. So we know that we have a lot of out-of-state visitors, actually. We have a lot of local users, but we also more and more are seeing more out-of-state. We've just now trying to get some data from the All Trails app. If any of you guys are hikers, it's a great place to find hiking apps, and they store a lot of data. So we're interested in seeing, that. We have a really busy and competitive calendar that does the reservations on the shelters. We had 266 people stay overnight in the cabin. It does not include all the kids in the school groups. We had people from as far away as Atlanta, Georgia, reserving the cabin. And we had at least 1 wedding proposal. It went well. She did say yes. And we had a wedding breakfast. And the most popular dates are full moon and solstices and stargazing, which is pretty cool. Last year we had 7,000 unique visitors to our website, and a staggering 43% of those searches were not because they knew they were like general web searches. They were just looking for a place to go. And that tells us that, we are supporting the tourism industry and supporting our neighbors by bringing these visitors in to support our economy. We also, very important to us, is the Pinnacle is a place to learn. I went there, I was 6 for the first time, first grade, and it's still a really important place for education. We get kids in grades 2 through 6. They're up there all the time. We also sponsor naturalists to help support those school groups. And we also have research studies, master's degree candidates from Antioch University. And we've had Putney School recently had a senior thesis. The Pinnacle lands are a great place to do a research project and carry it out because it's a long ridge line, as Jen described. So there's some parameters there, make it great for study. And we know because of the visitors that this is a unique recreational gem. And we see lots and lots of young people, and we hope they come back and move here and start raising their families. Let's see. I got a lot of notes here. Look, I haven't cried yet. This is great. It does happen to me. We're really inspired by the people who come to visit, but we're also very inspired by the land. Jen shared with you all of the ecological values that the land holds. And that's what's really, really important and excites many of the people that serve on the board. It's a real big motivator to serve on our board. So I just want to close by saying that conserving land isn't simple. I'm on like a steep learning curve here. And if it was simple, a lot more people would be doing it. Since I joined the board, I've really been in awe of how much knowledge, institutional knowledge, that's required to do this work at this level. Transparent, community-led conservation work. We are 15 people who give our free time, our energy, and everything that we have to make this a space for everybody. See, here it goes. Okay. So we are grateful that the state of Vermont supports land conservation through VHCB because there really is no other way for us to do this work. And for the decades-long relationship with them and Vermont Land Trust, and a big hug to Jen because she's been there with us for quite a few properties. And I really urge you to support the full base funding for VHCB at 36.9 million that was included in the governor's recommended 2026 state budget. Thank you.
Thank you. That's what, then thanks for crying.
It happens all the time.
Oh, but it's really important. I just want to say a couple things. Just I know this area, obviously, right? It's in my district. I take visitors there all the time. It's incredible, and there's also historic sites, and it ties all of the towns together, and it's all volunteer. I mean, it's just tremendous volunteers for decades, as they said. And just for y'all's information, you may know this already. We had a couple of days ago, it was outdoor recreation day in this building. So we had tons of people telling us about that. And one of the stats that they shared was Vermont is second only to Hawaii in the proportion of our revenue from outdoor recreation. So that is a major tourist and visitor bonus for us. And also it helps people move here. A lot of people have moved here just because of the outdoor recreation. And so that's one thing I just wanted to let you know. And then something I learned when I was with Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust is about VHCB, that it's a really historic and unusual combination to have the conservation folks and the housing folks together. Normally, those two entities are often in conflict. Some want to build homes, some want to preserve land. But Vermont was very wise 50 years ago, 35, okay. To put those in one organization. So they coordinate instead of compete, and it's worked out really well. So just want to interject that. So how about we go to?
I forgot to say we sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
We thought we would follow that beautiful presentation with Elizabeth Bridgewater from Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust, which was a nice connection to what you said. So
Okay, sounds great. Hello, Elizabeth. Hello. Thank you for being here. First, logistics. We have 3 new members on this committee, so I'm just going to let you know that the new members, we normally would have some VHCB funding in our budget, but we don't, because I just heard today that it was in the general fund. So we are still supportive.
So hi, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. My name is Elizabeth Bridgewater, and I'm the Executive Director of the Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust. And I'm joined today by 2 board members, Denny Frizzy, who's been involved with the Housing Trust for a very long time, both as a board member and as an architect, and worked on many of our projects. And Ellen Snyder, who's also featured in the beautiful photo here. Ellen's been on our board for 8 years and is also a resident member of, lives in one of our apartments. And then I'm also joined by Marianne Major and Bruce Whitney.
That's a great name, by the way.
I'm Scott. Marianne recognized her grandmother in one of those photos.
Oh,
And I thought I recognized Bruce in one of those photos.
Could be, I'm
Oh.
a big user of those
Yeah,
lands,
yeah.
all hiking, skiing, etc. Stargazing.
It's not on my computer, so I just wanna see how to navigate. Okay. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with the Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust, we were founded in 1987, and our mission is to strengthen the communities of Southern Vermont through the development and stewardship of permanently affordable housing and through ongoing support of residents. And this is the network of nonprofit housing providers throughout the state. And we're part of this robust network that is supported by VHCB, Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And you can see that collectively we cover all corners of the state. And of course, we do a lot of work in co-partnership with Evernorth. Kathy works. A little bit of our impact before I go into showing you some of how VHCB is supporting us. We own and steward 887 affordable apartments throughout the 2 counties, 42 mobile home lots, 16 commercial units, 145 shared equity homes that are affordable in perpetuity. And then over the last 5 years, you can see we've had quite a lot of impact with homeownership education, counseling, helping home buyers buy homes, helping homeowners repair their homes. It's really run the gamut of addressing the needs, the housing needs of in a variety of ways. And then the 3 sash panels at the bottom are kind of our signature way of supporting our residents through providing services right where people live. Here's a bit about VHCB's impact across the state since 2020. So, and I think I pulled these numbers off of their fact sheets because they're really impressive. Just since 2020, almost 2,300 multifamily rental homes, 1,900 newly created or newly afforded units, and almost 700 reserved for those exiting homelessness. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our impact around around helping people exit homelessness. As Jennifer said, we're here to ask for your support to fund VHCB at the governor's recommended budget of $36.9 million. We were really excited to see that the governor had recommended full statutory funding. We hope that you'll support that recommendation. But as housers trying to solve a housing crisis, we also recognize that it really isn't enough to really move the dial of where we need to go in the next 5 years. And I'm just going to use our pipeline as an example of that. So here's our see if I can get this. Yeah. This is our pipeline right now. So in the top is the Alice Holloway Drive project that's about to break ground this spring. Also a project that was in collaboration with the Vermont Land Trust. So we've got some really great experience working with them as well. And then 31 apartments at the Chalet property, which I'm going to share more detail about later in the presentation. And then all the units that are in red are unfunded. And so if you were to add those up and apply kind of an average per unit VHCB contribution, that would account for about 37% of the entire VHCB allocation. So you can just see with our pipeline alone, it's just not really enough to cover the whole state and the pipeline that is within all the other housing providers across the state. And so I just wanted to kind of put that into context. One of the big impacts that VHCB has in communities is to revitalize downtowns. This is a project called Central and Main in Windsor Village. And this was a parcel that had some soil contamination. So it was a brownfield site. It had was empty for decades after a fire on the property. And, you know, Windsor Village is a fairly small village, and so having a big hole in the middle of its downtown has a big impact in the kind of the energy and the continuity of the streetscape. And so, no other developers really wanted to tackle this project, and so we were invited by the Windsor Investment Corp to come in and do something meaningful around housing. So this project will result in 25 new homes for people. We're at the end of construction on this. This is actually taken in the fall. We're about to welcome families this kind of early summer. And I wanted to call out something about this project that is also kind of an unknown fact about VHCB, because this actually is one of the more expensive projects in the state. And I think people had a little bit of sticker shock when they saw how much it cost. And but what wasn't widely known was that the brownfield element drove the cost up. The fact that and you can see there was very little frontage on Main Street there. And so there was no way to get a driveway in off of the main road, nor did we really want to, because we wanted to have, a building facing the sidewalk and not have a driveway. So we had to come in from behind. So we had to build an access road. And then because of the zoning requirements in Windsor, we had to do a lot of parking, and there wasn't enough surface area to do parking. So we actually have an building parking garage. All of those three things drove the cost up by about $2 million or $79,000 per unit.
Wow.
Now, there were unique funding sources to cover each one of those that would not have been brought into Windsor had we not done this project. So we had added cost, we also had added funding sources. So that money that VHCB brought into the project actually leveraged about $2 million extra to cover the extra cost. So when you hear about, why are certain projects more costly than others, it really is about the unique situation in that site and in that town. And often there are special funds that can cover those, and Central and Main is a really good example of that. This is another impact slide that shows the impact of those leveraged dollars. And you can see that the blue is the VHCB funding in these various projects. And you can see that as the costs go up, and this is sort of more of a broader look than just one project, that the percentage of VHCB's contribution actually goes down. So you get to see the impact of those leveraged dollars across these different housing development projects across the state. Another impact that VHCB has in their local communities is to end homelessness. And with each of our projects, we set aside between 20 and 25 new apartments for people exiting homelessness or at-risk homelessness. And then when we turn over our vacancies, we've got a turnover rate of about 36% of people coming out of homelessness when we have a vacancy. So we're on the leading edge of solving the state's homeless crisis. And this gentleman that you see here has just got a really inspirational story. His name is Steve, and he lives at the Bellows Falls Garage, which is a project we finished several years ago. Steve was living in a sugar shack before he moved here. He had longstanding challenges with alcoholism. He was actually waiting for a liver transplant and was just in a really tenuous, challenging, vulnerable place, both in his living conditions, but also physically. He was one of the very first residents that moved into the building. And as you can see, his apartment is lovely. This is a project that I'm really proud of. This is one of the more challenging projects in the state because it was an old parking garage that we tore down and rebuilt in the footprint. And it's overlooking the Connecticut River. One of the reasons why I'm really proud of this project is that these views are typically reserved for people with a lot more resources than somebody like Steve. So you really have this sense of equity and justice, I think, that shows up in some of the projects that we build. And this one, I think, exemplifies that quite beautifully. So Steve is no longer a candidate for a liver transplant. When he got stable housing, he really spent some time focusing on his health and getting his alcoholism under control. And that stabilized his health in a way that he's now no longer in need of that. So that's a really I think a beautiful story that illustrates the impact on an individual that we've helped provide housing to. And then the last project I want to focus on is the Dahlem Chalet in West Brattleboro. And the reason why I chose this project is that it really covers quite a lot of community impact because we have a redevelopment plan that includes homes set aside for people exiting homelessness, new home ownership opportunities through our shared equity program, and general occupancy housing. So what you're looking at here is the Dahlem Chalet. It was built in the 1960s by a German immigrant couple from the Bavarian region of Germany, and they wanted to recreate this feeling of Bavaria in Western West Brattleboro. And it's in its heyday, it was really a lovely place, and it holds a lot of community memories, lots of weddings, lots of events. There was a restaurant. In fact, I think their original vision was just a restaurant, but the town of Brattleboro said, you can't have a restaurant unless you have a banquet hall. So then they had a banquet hall, but then they said, you can't have that without rooms. So this, the front piece, not the lawn, but the L that's the front, was at the top is a banquet hall, the middle is the restaurant, and then there were 6 apartments below. Later, they added on the long kind of traditional motel, and then you can see on the left, there's an outbuilding that also has 7 small apartments, and then there's a farmhouse on the property. By the time we bought this in 2020 as part of the pandemic kind of urgent response to helping people exit homelessness. This property is in pretty poor condition. However, it was one of the few motels in Brattleboro that was for sale at the time. It also sits on 17 acres. So we thought, wow, we could solve a problem right now and get people off the street into a home, albeit small and, not quite at the standards that we're accustomed to, but we can solve a problem right now and we have land for future development. So here we are 5 years later, ready to redevelop this property. And I'm just going to quickly show you some photos. So this is the very front of the chalet in the spring. This is the side hotel. This is the back of the property. It's built into a hillside, which is why it's not really great for permanent housing. It's very dark. There's one window per room. There's no kitchen. So we've got folks living there's in a stable place, but not quite meeting their needs long term. This is the entrance into the banquet hall. So we're developing this property in 3 phases. And the first phase is to build one building, new construction, with 31 apartments. And what we'll do is transition the current residents into that building. Because right now we've got several residents living in the traditional motel building right now. We are over time, we'll have 15 apartments set aside for people exiting homelessness, and the services on site by our partner Groundworks Collaborative. Phase 2, and we're kind of calling it phase 1.5 because we can do some of it concurrently with phase 1 because we're going to be using modular home construction, is to build 8 new shared equity homes. And we're really excited about this because West Brattleboro is a very sought after location. It's still in a village with some good energy and density, but it's in a more rural part of the town. And so it's just a really popular place. And I think having some new homeownership opportunities there, I think is going to be very welcome. And then finally, the third phase will be, and I say 30-ish because we haven't got to the design phase on the phase 3 yet, new townhouses and apartments in several buildings, 4 in the redeveloped historic chalet building, 8 in the new constructed townhomes, and then 20-ish apartments in a new construction school building. And I'll show you a site plan. So what you're looking at here is the site plan. And just to orient yourselves, the building on the right of the red line is a building that has been permitted and partially funded with VHCB funding. And that will be the first phase of this redevelopment plan. And that's the building that will contain 31 new apartments and 15 apartments set aside for people exiting homelessness. The middle smaller blocks on this site plan are the 8 new shared equity homes. And I'm going to show you a couple design options that we're looking at. And then the 3 other buildings to the left, the one that's outlined in kind of royal blue is the historic chalet building that I showed you. We're going to renovate and redevelop that to maintain the historic character and add new apartments there. And then the townhomes, and then a new constructed general occupancy building to the very far left. One of the things that I know Wendy will be really excited to hear about, because we've talked about this over the years, is that we were able to get the mover to put 3 bus stops on this campus, because right now the challenge around accessibility is quite dramatic. This property was built in the 60s when accessibility wasn't at the forefront of people's minds, and both the homes where people live and the actual campus itself is not really super accessible. So we're building sidewalks and lanes for people to travel, and then we're also bringing in public transportation. And that is a huge win to have 3 bus stops in this campus. So very excited about that. Here's a rendering of the new building that was just permitted a few weeks ago. And you can see we have both some cost conscious measures that you can see right away, as well as some design features. So we're balancing cost and design. So we have a fairly simple building, but by staggering it so that it wasn't one long massing line, we were able to create some visual interest while maintaining a fairly simple building construction. Here's from the side view from the parking lot. And you can see the entrance with lots of windows. We'll have the permanent supportive housing services in that section of the building. It'll be fully elevated and what you don't see from this is another, going back to the equity piece that is really important to me. The views from the other side are overlooking the mountain and just absolutely gorgeous views. The residents that live there right now are so excited to stay on the campus because they came out of homelessness into this sort of, in some ways, a little bit more remote than a downtown location, but they love living there because it's actually gorgeous and just this beautiful rural location. So everybody's really excited to stay in the neighborhood where they've called home now for the last 5 years. Here's the budget for this project, and you can see that the VHCB funding is just about 29% of the budget, and we've got a lot of other leveraged funds in there. The private equity is about 50% of the budget. So you get a sense of VHCB's both contribution, but also ability to leverage other funds. And then here are the design options that we're looking at for the homeownership options. So looking at, again, cost conscious and design elements. So we don't want to have 8 of the same exact houses, one right after the other. So we're looking at 2 different designs. We also want to meet the different household needs too. So we're looking at designs that have 3 bedrooms and designs that have 1 bedroom. So that gives you a sense of what we're aiming for on this campus. And then this is the project budget for the shared equity homes. And again, you can see the contribution from VHCB, both at the total project level and at the per unit level, also being around 30% of the project budget, again, showing their ability to leverage other funding. So I will end with just another thank you for being willing to hear testimony today. A plea to support the governor's recommendation of 36.9 million in full statutory funding for VHCB. Also a consideration for additional funding. I know there's some proposals circulating, and we would urge you to take those seriously and consider funding additional money for housing in this year's budget. And with that, I'll close and say thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? And does everybody know what shared equity is? Because it's a cool concept. Just it's
Keep it to us.
or
You want me
Bruce is
Sure,
actually the
sure.
director of the
Yeah.
program. and I'm happy
Director.
to- I'm
All
happy
right.
to have Bruce add.
So, VHCB provides, so we've done very little new construction for shared equity, so I'm very excited to have this. We have the 145 homes that Elizabeth talked. Most of those homes were brought in with what we call buyer initiated funds, funded by VHCB and the annual contribution. So they provide, right now, the grant amount is $80,000, and that buys down the sales price people need. So if they're buying a $300,000 home, we give them an $80,000 grant. They have to get a $220,000 mortgage, which is affordable at that point. In exchange for that money, they agree when they sell the home, they're going to share a majority of the appreciation that that house earned during their home ownership, during their period of ownership, and keep 25%. In that way, the taxpayer, the government only makes one initial investment into the property, and then it stays perpetually affordable and stays affordable because of that, and essentially paying forward by the homeowners. So we have 144 of those homes, and each resale, they actually become more affordable, and it's very successful. Most people, when they sell, they're able to move on to, regular housing, and have enough for a down payment to buy their next home.
Yeah, thank you. It's just a great model because it keeps the input of the state or whoever's funding it, that goes on in perpetuity, right? And then it doesn't become unaffordable. But the folks who are there now do get equity increases so that they are able to move on. I mean, it's just a really, really nice model, and it's not in that many places.
Right.
So thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll leave this for you.
Do you know that Windsor, Senator Major, do you know that Windsor development?
Yes.
And now to the Northeast Kingdom.
Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Shattuck. I'm the Executive Director of Rural Edge. And as you mentioned, we are the housing organization that serves the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. Lots of our operations very similar to some of the things Elizabeth mentioned. But one thing that's definitely consistent is our reliance on VHCB funding to do the work that we do. It is so important to our communities, and really it's consistent with our mission of strengthening Northeast Kingdom communities one home at a time. And we have done that. A little bit about our history. We began in 1986 as the Gilman Housing Trust. And that was actually after our first development, which was Gilman Senior Housing. VHCB funding comes with perpetual affordability restrictions. So Gilman Senior Housing is still occupied, still in our portfolio, serving an important place in Essex County, housing seniors today. We're a nonprofit housing and community development corporation. We've served the Northeast Kingdom for 39 years. We're also a member of the NeighborWorks organization, so we are monitored, assessed for our performance, like Windsor Women. And our board, similarly, includes representation from public, private, governmental, and resident representatives. So in the upper left is a project that we completed in partnership with Evernorth in 23. This really illustrates development on a rural scale. This is in West Burke, so that there was a development built by a private developer with subsidized housing. The Teal building had 9 senior units, and up on the hill were 3 family duplexes, and they were the ugliest units. Just really no design elements at all, but they were great housing resources. And when that elderly owner went to sell, they wanted to make sure it was preserved. So they reached out to us and we acquired it. A capital needs assessment showed that on those 15 units within the first 5 years, there was going to be an investment needed of about $1 million. So we looked at redeveloping the entire site. And it was a 7.5 acre site right in the village. You can walk to the school, the store, the library, the post office, the park. It was really important. So we added the building. We were able to add 8 additional units. So we have a total of 23 units. This is a rural project. 5 buildings, about 1/3 of a mile of private roads. The water system is a private system, but because it serves over 26 residents, it's considered a community system, and there are 3 separate leach fields. So when you talk about cost, when you talk about complexity, when you talk about why organizations like ours and my colleagues are here, it's because these developments wouldn't be done otherwise. It's also housing a lot of folks who are from West Burke area and really love the location. And I think, you can really see the relationship of the church and the historic senior building, and on the hill, the red buildings that sort of resemble farms, barn buildings, just a great addition. In the lower left is Derby Line Villa, which is about 500 feet from the Canadian border, but 9 units of senior housing. So in our area, we've traditionally addressed the scale of the communities. And so our projects tend to be a little smaller. That doesn't mean we don't have large ones, But I think it's really important to speak about what the VHCB funding brings. You know, we are going to have by the end of this year, just about 1,000 units all over the Northeast Kingdom, from duplexes to 48 units. On the upper left is New Avenue in downtown St. Johnsbury with 40 units. Lower left is Olivia Place in Lindenville, which has 20 units. We have, Elizabeth talked about her pipeline. We've got a robust pipeline, 22 different developments that we're working on. These range from large to small, the partnerships with Jay Peak in different communities all around the kingdom. And we really work with community partners to meet the needs of residents and really listen and develop properties that are compatible with local plans, market demands, and wishes. You know, our construction projects bring millions of dollars of economic development to communities, and we employ local firms. When I think of New Avenue, that was constructed during COVID, when just about everything was shut down, but we had about 60 people working in various small sections, and the impact that those 60 people had in keeping the businesses in downtown St. Johnsbury open was huge. And so I think we need to remember the impact of these funds on the local economy. We have a portfolio that contributes over $700,000 annually to local and school taxes. You know, we provide our guidance to community members, whether it's, you know, whether they're developing affordable housing or just want to bounce some ideas off. We are a resource. And really, we provide housing for the most vulnerable folks in our service region. 43% of the households across our portfolio have moved in from experiencing homelessness. We just did a survey of residents. About 70% of our residents have household incomes of less than $20,000 a year. So this funding is serving people in need, people who really value and appreciate it. And the work that we're doing in the Northeast Kingdom and across the state is just so vitally important. That's why we're here you've heard the $36.9 million. We appreciate that. I talked about a pipeline. Elizabeth talks about a pipeline. More will keep us going. So I'm going to focus on one new project. This is us looking at Northeast Kingdom at scale. So this is new unit development at Newport Crossing. So Elizabeth mentioned views. I kind of like to show our views as well, because we have long views looking north into Canada along Lake Memphremagog. And if you were to turn this, you have the South Bay. So a fantastic site. And we are looking to develop, or we are in the process of 40 new rental units. It's actually not just this site, because we are also doing 2 sites in Newport Town, and we're redeveloping just the convent, which is a building at the right at this time for rental housing. So combined, those 3 buildings will have 40 units. This is a brownfield site. One of the sites in Newport Center is a brownfield site. Elizabeth talked about the costs and time ramifications, the complexities which deter the private sector. We've got mixed income targeting, so some units for folks in higher incomes. We've got 14 subsidized units, and 12 across the 2 sites are designated for folks moving from homelessness. We're providing for diverse household composition. We've got 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. We've got community rooms in both communities where we'll have SASH on site, so support and services at home. And we've got lots of recreational space, little community gardens. The property in Newport Center is adjacent to a playground. And boy, we can, as I said, we can bring the views. The views from these units are pretty amazing. So here is sort of the Newport city component, which is a larger redevelopment. So Elizabeth talked about phased development. We have this as well. So this is 4 Founders Circle. It was originally the Sacred Heart Complex, and these gentlemen have been there. They've been to both sites and went there. So this is part of a large religious campus. It includes St. Mary Star of the Sea, which is a beautiful church that sits high over Newport City. And this is the associated campus, which was constructed beginning in 1951, the school. and it's sat empty and along with the convent have been on the market for the better part of the last generation. Many looked at the property, as you can attest, having walked through it
I
many
bought
times.
4 people reported for buyers for that property, and I just we couldn't get it to scale, and therefore that's why we have Rural Edge in there, and because we just couldn't get private enterprise to be able to make it work.
So part of the reason, it's combined buildings of 65,000 square feet, 8.5 acres, but it's a flat site. Great views adjacent to the existing neighborhoods, linked to the downtown by a sidewalk, has municipal water and sewer. But everyone, as Senator Engel said, were deterred. It was too much. It was overwhelming because the challenges, apart from the scale, were you had to negotiate with nuns. And I can tell you that was the biggest 30 years in this. They are the toughest negotiators I have dealt with.
And product of Catholic school, I can,
You can't argue with God.
I still get nightmares of Sister being that
Well, if you weren't so bad.
Yeah.
Because the entire site was considered a brownfield. About 25 years ago, the nuns had a couple of underground storage tanks removed. And they did that by the book, but there was no documentation as to what was done with the soil. So that meant we had to spend about $150,000 to test the entire 8.5 acre site. That took a lot of time, the planning, the cost, the resolution to deal with the brownfield ended up being about $58,000. But to get to that solution, so yes, that's a deterrent for anyone. Both buildings also full of asbestos. There's about $1 million worth of abatement between the two buildings. In fact, in the convent, the mortar in the concrete block construction all contains asbestos. So we aren't changing many window openings because we do not want to disturb much of that. And then, for us, an added challenge, because this was part of a religious complex, these buildings were deemed historic. And you might understand that with the older school, but the convent was deemed historic as part of the district and was noted for its lack of architectural details and design element. So we had to preserve that. That was the elevation that they said was top priority for us to preserve, because that's what the students would have seen exiting the school and the nuns would have seen as they headed home. So that is lower left is the vision that's going to be preserved. In Newport, we listened to what communities wanted. This is a picture of Newport Center, 2 really blighted buildings that had been occupied, suffered from poor management or no management. But Newport City said they wanted to create a neighborhood. When we said we were going to go up there, they said, we love that. And they really supported our vision to create different housing types, serve different needs. And when we looked at zoning, there was a big number that it could support. And they said, do you think you could do more? We rarely hear that. And they expressed the desire for that because they cited one of our developments on Main Street and said, that's exactly the type of new construction we want to see. And that was a project that was developed 15 years ago with Evernorth, and just as a testament to good design, development that's supported by VHCB, managed well, and continues to serve the community so much that they want to replicate it. In Newport Town, they wanted to see the dilapidated eyesores replaced with efficient properties that complemented their town and addressed contaminated sites. Both communities wanted a range of unit sizes and affordability, and there was no shelter. There is no shelter in Orleans County. So having units that were available for folks experiencing homelessness was also a priority. So this is our total site plan for the Sacred Heart Complex. This is what we originally started looking at and how it laid out. So the building in the upper right is the convent, which is under construction now, 26 units of rental housing. On the upper left is the high school, which we anticipate closing and starting construction on. We own it. Construction closing in October. It will be 24 shared equity condominiums, fully funded, including funding from VHCB. And when I say 36.9 million is great, but all that additional funding could really help. We have this permitted as a planned unit development and can have up to 120 additional units. So we have cleaned up the brownfield. We're installing the infrastructure and the road and the access, all of those things that relate to cost so that we can have more affordable development, which is why it's so important to help build out this neighborhood. And really speaks to the need for funds. Two, because we've got this developed as a planned unit development, we don't have to own and develop everything. We can look at other developers and provide opportunities. So there's really the flexibility to create a really dynamic community. Everyone loves a video. This was just so rewarding to see this building come down. And I think the little kid in me that, wants to go to a construction site. When this building was looked at initially, folks left in tears. These units were so substandard. There was a woman who left a domestic violence situation and her 4 kids living in the top 2 floors. The furnace had stopped to work, so there was a temporary propane heater that went through a window that couldn't close completely. And so at least they weren't going to get carbon monoxide poisoning because there was a lot of airflow, but it was really cold. They had space heaters everywhere and little kids going throughout this unit. And that fire escape that you just saw them tear down was sort of their means of egress in case any of those situations led to a fire. And you knew they were going to be able to get out because it was a metal door and it was rusted so that the bottom about 2 inches was gone. And this woman said she was so glad to have housing. And what she liked about this location was the school is 3 doors away. She knew where her kids were. She was always within eyeshot of them. Another 3 doors away is a store so that her environment in that time of need, in that time of crisis and vulnerability, she wanted to keep her family close and safe. It was all right there. That's the importance of these in-town locations, the added cost, the complexity, and what the HCB funding helps support. So this is ultimately what's permitted now and under construction in Newport City. It's because we use planned unit development, it allows for increased density. We've got shared parking. The municipality has agreed to take over the roads and the infrastructure. There's flexibility with the setbacks, and it helps with costs. As I said, we've captured some of those costs up front. What the community has gained, desperately needed new units, both rental and home ownership, and certainty about what the future would look like. We started construction. We acquired this at the end of November. We've already got units framing in. We've got new footings being poured for an addition to the convent building. So it's really exciting to see the action and the change taking place. We expect the multi-family building in the former convent will be done shortly after the first of the year. But what will the future look like? We've got 2 phases that are funded. And the HCD funding was imperative that, and it's imperative to those 120 units. I think the governor's recommended statutory funding, and that's fantastic, but our work continues. The need continues. We've worked with communities. We do it in communities large and small. The need is huge. We thank you for listening today. We thank you for your support of the HCB, and we ask for your willingness to both support the statutory funding and additional funding, because these units simply wouldn't be built without PHC.
Thank you very much. Senator Ingles.
All those projects that you saw, as far as with what Patrick did, private enterprise couldn't touch in a million years. I'm appreciative that BHCB is involved. Those are exactly the type of projects I envision them doing, the ones that private enterprise just can't make turn. And there'll be successes. And again, if you want to talk about views, They are tremendous. One of them actually looks at my house, which I won't point out. It's actually, yeah, we're very appreciative of what's going on in our community.
Yeah, and thanks for your presentations, getting all of us except I think for Bennington, so next year.
Cornerstone housing.
Yeah, but there's a lot of good stuff
Right.
happening in Bennington.
Housing is
Yes.
a lot now.
Yeah.
Addison, Rutland, and that.
No, it's been very helpful to me. And I presume, and you went to school there, so they preserved the view for you, which is great.
We could sell them a unit.
And just condos too. I really appreciate that the ownership in the same place as the rental, so that folks have options. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for the information.
Yeah, thank
Thanks for your work.
Thank you for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna take a break. Students.
Thank you for your
Yeah, we do
service.
have it.
That's really.
Thank you, guys.
Just want to explain what
Thank
we're
you for
gonna.
fitting in our.
Yeah, that's true.
We're still.
Hey, Patrick. Yeah. Do you mind waiting in the hall for a second? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so, something I would like us to do, it shouldn't take more than 15 minutes, is we had a request from, the,
Excuse me, I'm just. He needs. I'll come find you out. We're still.
no, we'll wait, it's okay. Yeah, I think they're done, yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So committee, yeah, we received a request from the Appropriations Committee to look at a portion of the BAA that was generated by the House Institutions and Corrections Committee. And so, we have that language. I would like to just go over it with you guys for 15 minutes at the most. Okay, so, let's adjourn now and we'll come back in 5 minutes. Does that work? Okay. So we're adjourned, but.
I adjourn.
Figure this out. Much time.